everyone, welcome back to our next very exciting episode of Qualt Q&A, our video conversation series with industry experts. I'm joined today by a favorite in that category of industry expert, David J Neff. He's an author, speaker, and a whole lot more. I've had the great pleasure of working with him in my past and wanted to call on him for his particular area of expertise, and that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to be talking about how you build an insight-led center of excellence. And there's really nobody better to talk on this subject. So with that, I will toss it over to David for his intro.
Hey, everybody. David J Neff. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward today. I have about 20 years experience in digital strategy. 90% of that is e-commerce. From Jenni back in the day when we would get an order at the American Cancer Society, and I would print it. And I would go downstairs to the distribution center and hand it. And they would be like, what was your name again, kid? And why are you here? And what are we shipping to where? Because we were just used to shipping pamphlets to people, not actual anything they bought online. And we did that all in Lotus Notes with web trends, if you remember that. So a very long time ago when it comes to qualitative and quantitative. So happy to be here today.
Taking it way back. That is some well-rounded experience. I love it.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Well, on this topic, I'd love to just kind of center for a second around understanding the type of consulting work you're really heavy on the consulting side at Accenture. I'd love to unpack that a little bit and then dive into the discussion.
Yeah, of almost 20 years in digital, 10 of that was on client side, and the rest has just been in consulting for Fortune 500 brands, large nonprofits, and then very tiny startups that aren't around anymore. And then I've been lucky enough to found 2 startups of my own, and have kind of always used qualitative and quantitative data to make decisions, to understand what our products are doing in the market, what people actually want to buy, what their intentions are. And then that's kind of just translated into great. Well, who are the people that actually ingest and use this data? What do they look like? What is their team structure? And those last probably 8 years of consulting have primarily been in organizational consulting. So we think a lot about people, process, technology, culture, data, and strategy. And of all of those, culture being the most important. And really honing in on, do you have a culture that actually will let you use qualitative insights and quantitative insights? Do you have a culture that's okay with your current KPIs? Are you sharing out information? Are you teaching others constantly what your organization is doing so they don't think of you as the other, or, oh, that new group that won't last in the organization? So we do a ton of that for a lot of Fortune 500 with my team at Accenture.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's really centered around that maturity model to ultimately help them grow. So you've seen a lot of organizations that do it well, do it poorly, and everything in between. Curious kind of to kick this off, what's your recommendation for approaching change management specifically within an organization? I know that's a really hot topic that never seems to go away.
Well, it absolutely never goes away because we're human beings who are constantly going through 1,000 different things in our life, and we bring that all to work every day, right? And you and I have no idea what the person across from the table went through the day before, the week before, much less in their private life. Maybe you kind of understand what's going on at work. So that idea of change management, I think, is just so super important when you're launching anything new, like a center of excellence, or you're building a new qualitative insights team from the ground up, or maybe you just merged with another organization and you have to figure out what that new structure looks like. And for me, the number one thing is calling a timeout. And nobody likes to do this, which is why you have consultants to help you, and actually take a look at your organization. Where are you across people, process, technology, culture, all those things I mentioned? What are your objectives, OKRs, SMART goals, FAST goals, whatever you want to call in your organization? And what's blocking you from actually achieving that? And, to your point, we've built some kind of maturity models around e-commerce. We've thought a lot about qualitative teams, quantitative teams, how those all fit together. And so, but I believe it's really taking a look at where you are and what's kind of getting in the way. Because most of the time we're like, welcome, go ahead, get started. Here's the new project. Here's the new goal. Here's your new OKRs for the year. But we never actually get to have a chance to talk with maybe our bosses, maybe our teams, maybe other people we work with in the organization about what's getting in the way of that. We're often told in today's society and environment, cool, just go do it, right? And that's kind of hard to do if there's huge, large blockers in your way that, by the way, would probably benefit 100 other people in the organization if you solved it, not just one person, right?
Yeah, 1000%. And that's a great segue into my next question, which is really centered around, those big blockers, right? What you have seen the gamut. What's the common major cause of failure that you see for these large transformational programs over and over again?
Two things, right? And I'll start with the lesser of the evils, maybe, and that's process. In my mind, we as human beings, as organizations, as organisms, get so caught up in how something gets done sometimes that we are not seeing the forest for the trees, as people like to say, right? And, most of the time what we've done, especially in larger companies, is overcomplicated process. There's 100 steps to publish something to your website. If you wanted to run a test on a cart, just a simple test on a checkout cart on an e-commerce website, there's 60 people that you need to talk to all of a sudden, right? And, why does that happen? Because over time, we're growing teams, people have fiefdoms, people want to add more people to their team. People over time tend to, maybe their job changes so many times that the thing that they're best at is process. And, it's like watching the movie Office Space, right? I take the plans and I hand them to the engineers and we're like, why couldn't that team just give it to the engineers, right? And so I feel we just get lost in process sometimes as human beings, or there's no process at all. It's utter chaos. People are saying, hey, Jenni, could you do this for me? Well, yeah, I can get to it, but I have all these other things. Yeah, but didn't you see that Post-it note I left on your desk last week that this was due on Friday? And you're like, no, first of all, I work remote, so I did not see your Post-it note on the desk. And also, this might not even be my job. Who is this person? So I feel organizations get caught of either overcomplicating process or not having any process. And then the thing that's the bigger problem that we see the most often is culture, right? You have a culture of silos. You have a culture of no silos, but nobody wants to collaborate because something weird happened between e-commerce and marketing 3 years ago. And by the way, nobody there remembers what it was. They just know on day 2 when they start that maybe those groups don't get along, right?
People watching this video are nodding emphatically right now. Everybody's in there.
And so I feel, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you don't get in and understand and point your culture in the right direction, you can do all the strategic workshops, have all the consultants, have new leadership, everyone come in, and nothing's going to change if that culture is not going to change. So that's a big part of what we do, is identifying these kind of outer problems and internal problems that relate to culture and teams and how you change that culture.
I love it. I think that idea of the thing that happened 3 years ago between Department X and Department Y is so common that we just hear of Fortune 500s across the board. And teams are desperate to fix it and resolve it, right? And they just need that validation that it is the most important blocker. I think that's really powerful. So let's flip that coin over and say, I'd love to hear a little bit about your most common observation for the large transformational programs that succeed at the organizations you've seen do it really well.
I think part of it is obviously, the flip side of that coin is a good culture, a culture of collaboration, a culture of openness, a culture of transparency. But sometimes you have all of those and there's still things missing. And so in those things missing, I still see a lot of organizations that do not sit people down and build and understand goals, right? We have these company objectives that are in the elevator when you used to go to work. Maybe they're on your intranet, maybe they're on the back of your corporate key card or whatever it would be. But people are like, great, one of our giant objectives is to be sustainable. What do I have to do with that? Right? Am I a part of that? Am I not a part of that? Is that some whole group here? Is that their objective? So these objectives are usually so high level in a company, Jenni, and you got to break them down into goals. We love FAST goals from MIT Sloan. Folks can Google that and understand it. But I just love the concept of these actionable, strategic, timely, right? All of these goals and how you understand them and how you approach them. And then that goes to, and then what are, let's be honest with ourselves, the problems getting in the way of those goals and how do we solve those? Because I do think a lot of times organizations and people are rewarded on completing projects, not necessarily on the quality of those projects or the outcomes of those projects. I gave Jenni 6 things to do. She did them. Awesome. And now Jenni's going to do a great job at those things, but like, are we actually checking what the output is? And does that output move the needle? So I feel that organizations are doing it really well. They have the culture that everyone talks about nowadays, right? Everyone publishes and has conversations about. But the next step of that is great. Individual goals, departmental goals, team goals, and then how those individuals can actually contribute to that team, and then laddering that up. How does that team actually contribute to overall objectives? And if it is a high performing, high maturity team, they have those and they understand them, and probably even a little bit they're driven by them, right? Like I have these 4 goals and damn, I only got 3 this year. And so I want to re-add that goal because I really want to get that one next year. And I think that's a true measure of success in these types of teams.
I would imagine I don't imagine, we've both seen, right, that it's retrospective as much as it is forward-looking and can help with hiring and the right playbook for hiring to find those really outcome-driven and focused team members. And so, I think you and I have talked at length before about the most critical of those team members is oftentimes to find that evangelist executive.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit of your thought on that. How do you find that evangelist key exec that's going to help you drive the program, the optimization that you're after?
It's definitely hard. We work for a large streaming company, based out of California. And when we did one of these large maturity projects to help them understand where their team was, the pleasure of that team was day one, they were like, we have to find a leader for this thing. And we know it's not us. We're not high enough. We'd probably be fantastic, but we don't have the pull in the organization. We don't have the ability to go grab a budget. We don't get invited to the right meetings. And so I loved that they, number one, it should have been them, but it couldn't be for all sorts of different reasons. But they knew they needed that person. And so that's a big battle sometimes. It's just knowing that you need that person. And then to your point, the second battle is to go find that person. And, we look across so many different avenues when it comes to qualitative and quantitative data. The folks watching this could probably list 9 organizations that claim that, or that hire for that, or that used to run that, but not anymore. And maybe they didn't want it. Maybe they do want it back. And so there's a lot of changing. I feel, especially when it comes to UX research and where that sits, right, in an organization. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was probably great. Where does e-commerce fit? 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe that was where does social media fit? And remember, we used to have vice presidents of social media. You don't see that anymore. Social media is now a part of marketing, and that's where it lives. And there's paid, there's organic, there's customer service. Everyone shares different pieces of that social media puzzle. And I feel we see the same thing too for UX research and a lot of the qualitative teams that are getting built. In this case, it was a VP of product because we looked across IT, advertising, sales, marketing, customer acquisition, and we talked to all those people. And, several people were like, that's interesting. I might want that. And we're like, and then we found the person who was like, no, I want to own that. And you know what? I used to do it before at this other organization. So I feel it's a journey to find that person. That person has to want to add something to their plate that may or may not be the cool, hot new thing, right? At the time, right? And then I think number three, that person needs some sort of background in qualitative, in the case of this conversation, and in our conversation, in the background of A/B testing and optimization and personalization. So those are kind of the three things in my mind. And then hopefully that person goes and they go to bat for you, right? And they talk to procurement, they help you work on your governance, all the things that kind of make up a center of excellence.
Yeah. It's kind of the high school equivalent of when you would, pick superlatives for different things. It's just this person has a superpower in this particular area. And I think it's you make such a powerful and seemingly simple point, but it's a really complex conversation to have, is to identify and just ask and go around and discover, right? It's a discovery effort of who are the right stakeholders. And oftentimes you do need that outside perspective to do that objectively. That's really important as well. But that totally resonates. And it's one of those really seemingly simple things that is so powerful and often complex.
And I feel too, Jenni, right? You don't want the authoritarian figure in that role. You need the coach. You need someone who's going to put on their coaching hat and help you figure out politics and who to work with and how to prioritize your work, and to take that Post-it note and throw it in the trash because that doesn't count, right? But then also have a conversation with that person while you threw their Post-it note away. And so in my mind, at that particular streaming client, finding that coach who maybe used to be a player and is now a coach was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, coaches out there that are hearing this, if you have that personality and fit in that box, go raise your hand. That's a great point. So kind of taking that one step further down the field, how do organizations really build out their ideal research team as a center of excellence when they're just getting started?
Yeah, at Accenture, we really believe in kind of three models for centers of excellence, right? There's really what we call mavericks, or almost the Wild West of, you have one person who's doing it and they're doing a good job. People are starting to notice, they understand it. But the queue is filling up. There's a lot for that person to do. And someone in the organization says, we probably need a second person. Or hopefully that person speaks up and says, hey, it's time. I need to hire a team. There's other people who could be doing this and helping me run this. And so they move from kind of that, lone wolf to almost, a breathing in. There's a great person on my team named Jeff Knox, and he always describes it from his days at Dell as centers of excellence are breathing in part of an organization. So you have one person, two people, three people, and even though they're hired or maybe they're on the same team, they're all doing it a little differently, right? And so there's some point where you can't have 50 people all bugging procurement for tools and costs and budgets, or designing their own quantitative numbers, or deciding we're all going to use this platform, we're all going to use that platform. I believe statistical analysis is X. You need some consensus on that. And so the second phase is almost a breathing in of all of that, and actually creating that center of excellence and saying, you know what, we have a group of practitioners who have a skill, and this skill is going to become a new capability at the company. And somebody needs to call time out, look at it, start to build documents and governance around it, start to figure out what's the platform they'll all use, negotiate, talk to folks at WEVO about what that looks like and everything else. And then also, what does the team structure look like? Do we need a vice president of social media, or is it a part of marketing? And then also education. There needs to be a formal plan, and everyone forgets this, a formal plan of this new capability in the organization. Guess what? We need to tell people about it. We need to advertise our wins. We need to talk about our losses. We need to do plus deltas where we figure out what's going well and what could change. All those things take time, and people are doing those on top of their normal jobs, but it forms that center of excellence. And then for me, a year, maybe a year and a half at the most later, that goes away and everyone knows what the heck's going on. those folks have a place to land. They're not just in some center of excellence that never gets picked up. They have a business unit that they all move into. It's a practice, it's a capability. People know how to use it. They know who to call. And so for me, those are kind of the three phases. And a center of excellence doesn't last forever. If it did, it would be horrible. It would be like some never-ending committee that just goes on and on and on, and nobody's getting anything done. Or it becomes a 200-step process to, talk to the center of excellence in Oz. And instead, we're like, no, we just want these people to get organized. We want to breathe in, and then want to breathe them back out into the organization wherever they belong.
Yeah, that's such a great visual when you get stuck on it. It's just going back to that idea that it's a living, breathing organism within the larger organization. I love it. Well, you covered my next question, which is how do they kind of mature this center of excellence as it grows? And I think you hit on a really powerful part, which is just understanding up front that the COE isn't meant to be forever. So that's really sticky. I love that. So, you talked about procurement and all the hoops that folks have to think about jumping through. The question we get and feel a lot is around tech, right? To embrace that center of excellence. So curious your thoughts on really when and what organizations need to do and consider in their tech stack as they work to create that insight-led COE.
It's an interesting question because I feel there's so much politics tied up in that sometimes of what tool we just bought, what contracts we have. Will procurement approve this new tool? Is it even worth us going to get a demo of a new tool? Because by the way, our culture in procurement is that'll take 6 months. Or gosh, our legal team won't even sign an NDA to get a demo from this particular vendor, right? And so for me, I feel that part of the technology, a part of that roadmap, again, goes back to culture. It goes back to having a good working relationship with the folks in procurement or IT services, or whoever controls that at your business, or being that maverick and just scheduling the demo, right? And making it happen, taking a look at the technology, and then going back and having a good conversation. And yes, you're going to have to look at 3 or 4 pieces of technology to understand what's the best usage of it. But I feel nowadays, if I was a marketer or an e-commerce person at a client, man, you know this, Jenny, the choices are endless, right? Am I just trying to get something up and running? Well, you know what? Shopify is fantastic, right? There's no need to go build out a giant product from one of these big names that I won't mention, because Shopify does a fantastic job. Again, the tool, you guys at WEVO, obviously helping you think through qualitative insights. You could go grab Google Analytics and get that code up and on your site for quantitative and good, solid quantitative data in almost no time at all. And, nothing's ever one line of code like everyone tells you guys. Everything's a little more complicated than that at the end of the day. But I feel now in 2021 and into 2022 is a perfect time to actually go out and look. And there's tons of qualitative vendors. There's tons of quantitative vendors that we run across as Accenture that are brand new, just got their second round of funding, and are really coming at some of the big players in the market. But again, that's the easy part. I think the hard part about the technology stack is unpacking it and understanding why all these decisions were made. And then again, convincing someone somewhere that you need something new, especially if you don't have a good working relationship with procurement or they've always stonewalled you before. And I've been in both sides, right? I've been in the client side of, oh my gosh, this takes us 3 months to get something through procurement, and I need to look at 5 vendors. There's not even 5 vendors in the space, right? And I've been in the side of like, hey, we're Accenture, and I get it. You got to go look at 2 other people and compare and contrast us, and here's why we think we're the best at what we do. So totally have empathy for all those folks.
Yeah. It's funny, those are the 2, you hit on 2 of the things that we hear at WEVO the most in terms of, oh, thank God kind of reaction is we don't have to go through that tech integration because it's not an engineering requirement. we're agnostic of that. But then the other part we just see so much relief is that, just let's talk about a proof of concept. Let's talk about a pilot program option, to your point. Like, let the Mavericks really prove the ease and value of, the idea and the practice of just using that muscle, and see how it feels to the organization. And then if that adds strength, which we're confident in all those cases that it will, then it proves itself. And you really just want to get out of the way of making that easier. So totally on the same page with that. Awesome. To wrap us up, I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about your prediction. Everybody always wants to know what's in the crystal ball, and I'd love to unpack kind of how you see that. The prediction really just around what's going to matter the most in this future that's rapidly upon us of digital transformation.
I do think it is understanding and harnessing data at the end of the day. I believe we all graduated and entered the workforce, almost everyone, unless you have a hardcore analytics and data background, of not knowing enough and not understanding enough and not being even, maybe a level 1 out of 10 levels when it comes to data. So I feel all of us, no matter your age, no matter your background, like, unless you came out with your Bachelor of Science in Analytics, right? Or you studied math, then this is not for you, right? But I feel the rest of us as e-commerce executives, marketing executives, even startups that are watching this and trying to understand it, need to go back and really educate ourselves, take some training, take some education around how to understand data, the visualization of data. For those of you watching this, I love Edward Tufte. A bunch of great books, a bunch of great lectures about the visualization of data and how sometimes that data is not presented in a very easy to understand way, or is presented in a misleading way. And we need to cut through that and understand what this data is actually saying. So I feel, this idea of educating ourselves, anyone listening will be big. And then I secondly believe, for everyone out there, when it comes to digital transformation, your culture is going to smash that and just, punch it in the face if you don't have the right culture. So you can think about new platforms, new teams, center of excellence, whatever it would be. But if it is collaborative, that is honest and open, go find a new job, because your job is going to be horrible, right? We're in the middle of the great resignation of 2021 and probably into 2022. So that's not a bad thing, because again, you can either work to change the culture, or you can't change it and it's probably time to get out of there. So, I'm not telling anyone to do that listening, but it is a good time to pause and reflect and think about the culture of your company. And are you changing it, or is it kind of rolling you over at the end of the day?
Yeah. That's great. And if you're one of those Mavericks or coach personalities, don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, if not now, eventually, I'd love to work toward owning this idea of a center of excellence. I think that willingness and vision for executive champions is that really critical part, like you called out. So, absolutely. David Neff, thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Such good thoughts here. We'll share a blog with all the good stuff and links to all the great material that you mentioned, and where folks can contact you, and really just appreciate the time and thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Jenny. It's been fun. Cheers.